at a point in time coming off of a wild Saturday of college football. People are consistently peeking over at this board. He actually would not be my number one overall pick, nor would I bet him to be the number one overall pick. I think you got that next wave of NFL players, which is so enticing, which when you see Jaden Daniels come into the NFL and you go, I can get something like that with a guy with just as good an arm.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
What's going on, college football fans? Welcome into College Football Today here on SportsGrid TV. Not just any college football today, it is time for the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Dubs Anderson. Wasn't with us last weekend, but that's the crisp on top of this post-game show. We get to catch up on some opinions because we are just 3 Saturdays out from the close of this collegiate regular season, that is. So first and foremost, Dubs, welcome back. How you doing? How's everything been?
Kasey, fantastic to see you. Week 11. Cannot believe it. 3 more weeks before we hit that new look college football playoffs. It's truly been an exciting, wild afternoon. Looking forward to breaking it all down with you over the next hour there. So a couple of big upsets, a couple of big individual performers and standouts. Live Tigers in Baton Rouge, and we've already got a couple of goalposts making their way down a couple of main streets. This is college football. This is as good as it gets.
I know, more than a couple late-night stretch games tonight, which is kind of the norm gearing towards the end of the season, but hasn't been our norm in a while, having so many late-night games. That just means that the football fun continues to roll on this Saturday night. Now, before we start diving into the Saturday slate here on SportsGrid TV, let's check in on some of these games that are getting ready to come to a close. If you guys have been watching Endgame Live throughout the day here on SportsGrid, you know that we were talking about this Alabama-LSU game, the expectation, the anticipation, and Alabama just continues to add to the board right now, the score being 42-6, a lone 6 for LSU with the 2-minute warning coming in close and hot in that fourth quarter. And then when it comes to Nevada and Boise State, this one was neck and neck at halftime, 14-14 apiece. And right now, Boise State extends their lead 28-14 with the ball 3:25 left in the fourth. Virginia versus Pittsburgh, well, Virginia decided to take over here, 21-19 versus ranked Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is ranked at 23. Probably something else, Dubs, me, myself, and Rich will get into because we got to kind of navigate how these top 25 teams, where they started and how they've shaken up as to date. And then Penn State, they needed to come away with a big win after last week's performance, 35-6 on top of Washington. 2-minute warning in that fourth quarter. And as Dubs mentioned, BYU getting the action started versus Utah. They'll see if they can continue their streak of perfection. So taking it back to the top of the day a little bit, we had Florida versus Texas. And while you'll never hear me root for Florida, Dubs, I'm sure you've heard me complain about them. I'm sure you've heard the maybe digs that I've made occasionally. I had to give them a little credit because last week they put on a good I want to say, show versus Georgia in the first half. They lose their new QB1 at the time, DJ Lagway, in the second quarter before halftime. Then they come back and they just kind of lose any reins that they had on that matchup. Then they go against Texas, who's been one of the most offensively sound teams for the most part. Texas comes out 49-17, but having had your normal QB1, having not put so much pressure on your defense, could have been a bit of a closer game, but regardless, Texas showed that they are here to play and put their entire game together from offense, defense to special teams. What'd you think?
Yeah, and I think it's been a matter of finally getting back to that top offensive stride that we thought we'll get in here with the Longhorns earlier this season for Steve Sarkisian and his team. They really just haven't had that spark or that consistency over the last month of football there. But Quinn Ewers absolutely turned up with a masterclass performance here for Texas. Coming into this one, ranked number 5 in the nation. They get the cover. We get the overs, 49-17. But taking a look at the box score here, Quinn Ewers was absolutely in his bag down there in Austin this afternoon. 19 for 27, 333 passing yards, 5 touchdowns. 5 touchdowns. Quinn Ewers is absolutely back, and this is a scary outlook for any other big program. And just having those question marks about the Longhorns, they answered a lot for me here today, Kasey.
Yeah, and I was excited for the performance by Quinn Ewers. I mean, coming back from that oblique situation, we know that a lot of people were like, okay, seems like he needs a little bit more time. But what I appreciate is that the trust remained there. Even in that game that we saw Arch come in for just a little bit, as soon as the second half came about, they put Quinn right back in it to make sure they protected his mental, and it's paying off today. So what's coming up as the season gets ready to wrap, I'm excited to see what Texas delivers. You mentioned upsets, and Miami falls under that category today. Georgia Tech, 28-23, topping the Miami Hurricanes, and it didn't slow down Cameron Ward's performance by any means. I mean, you're talking about another 300-plus yard performance by Ward, but Georgia Tech was able to basically run the ball in a number of ways down Miami's throat, and then outside of that, it was the fact that they came up with so many strong defensive plays, especially on third down. What do we make of this one with the ACC?
Don't sleep on the Yellow Jackets, a real sort of gritty football team, and that grit was enough to get them across that finish line in first against the Canes here this afternoon. So this is one of the bigger upsets that we saw of the day there. Miami going off as 9.5-point favorites. Couldn't even win this thing straight up. 64.5 was the total, so the unders is going to come into play there. But for Miami, the Hurricanes, this is a big loss. You know, it's their first loss for the season. They've been playing some really strong and consistent football. They've been putting up plenty of points, but it was that defensive edge for Georgia Tech that absolutely shut down the Canes. And if you look at the numbers, you would think there's no way that they lost this football game. You know, Cam Ward was absolutely fantastic. No turnovers, 3 passing touchdowns. And on the other side, you look at the quarterback play, it was far from strong. They really had to get a couple of different looks to get those points up on the board, but it was enough once it was all said and done. So I think for Georgia, their defense should be absolutely commended, because the Canes have been, you know, a bit of a track meet offense from what we have seen going through this season, undefeated until just a couple of hours ago there. So that was one of the big upsets of the afternoon there. So big win for Georgia, a little concerning for Miami Hurricanes. They got caught in a bit of a look-ahead spot.
Yeah, and it was maybe, I hate to say due time, but I mean, Louisville had them against the ropes just a few weeks ago. They were just able to kind of outshoot them in the second half of their matchup. Now, you mentioned upsets. You mentioned some of these games really kind of destroying the overs and unders. I know one game that I heard a few guys in production super upset about, and that was the Michigan Wolverines making it a tighter game versus Indiana. 20-15 was the victory for Indiana over the Michigan Wolverines. We know what the quarterback carousel has been when it comes to Michigan. Warren with 137 passing yards. Honestly, not much of an offense getting going here, but the 15 points should kind of replicate that. 20 points for the Hoosiers, but Curtis Rook, 206 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, but Williams through the air matching him pace for pace, 70 receiving yards through 6 receptions. What do we make of this one? Did you have any spread on this one that you trusted? Were you just as upset as some others today, or did this kind of pan out the way you expected?
14.5, two touchdowns. They're always going to keep it close enough to get us the cover. Looking forward to this betting card that we get to share later in the show. But for the Wolverines, you know, strong performance, but for them, this is not good enough. You know, you're sitting at 500 for the season. We don't measure success by close calls or covering that number in college football. We do as bettors when we talk about it once it's all said and done here late on Saturday evening. But for Indiana, fantastic. Undefeated, 10-0, 7-0 conference play. All things point towards that championship game. The Ducks, they also got a win there earlier on the Saturday card. But Indiana, very, very impressive. They're not doing it and picking up the style points, but the quarterback play has been pretty efficient. I know Rourke had that one turnover, that one interception, but when we're talking about the MVP Heisman conversation, this has been a name that's been thrown out the last couple of weeks. I mean, you've got to parallel the success here for the Hoosiers with what we have seen from Curtis Rourke at quarterback. Run game really didn't have a lot to set the table with, but they had a couple of different wide receivers getting in the mix. They could get it downfield, and when you get off to such a fast start, they're leading 17-3 at halftime. The Wolverines were playing catch-up, and they just don't have the points in them and trying to get back in that game. For Davis Warren, he was trying his best, but there's levels to this game, and right now, Wolverines, they're not on the same level as what we've seen from Indiana, who I dare say are one of the best teams in college football right now.
Yep, I could not agree more. Updates around the league, 33 seconds and clock winding down. Alabama versus LSU, holding that lead 42-6. LSU with the ball. Boise State 28-21 over Nevada. Virginia 21 over 19 on Pittsburgh. Penn State 35-6, and then Utah up on BYU 7-3. So stick with us here on College Football Today on SportsGrid TV. On the other side of this quick break, we continue to break it all down.
Together, both Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the two big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into College Football Today, the recap show. Happy Super Saturday right here on the SportsGrid Network. I'm Dubs Anderson alongside Kasey Hudson with a quick round table of the Saturday slate and what we've seen here for Week 11 in the college football. Some big matchups, some standout brilliance across the park here, and a couple of big games still in the mix. If you look for a live update, it's Bama 42-13 over LSU. The live Tigers out there at the stadium, but not enough to keep LSU in this ball game. Jalen Milroe has been absolutely fantastic with his wheels. 185 rushing yards, Kasey. If that's not enough to get your attention, 4 rushing touchdowns as well. So star quarterback for Bama, putting him on his back right now.
Has he put himself back, or I would say, I guess, higher in the Heisman candidate conversation? Because while he was, a top 3, top 4 guy, the rankings started to drop a little bit. Alabama has some narrow misses in terms of wins and losses, and now all of a sudden you've got this performance where we're seeing the dual threat quarterback in the full package all the way through again. So does that add to the ranking for him?
Absolutely. And with college football, we're looking for style points. This kind of performance could be the Heisman moment for Milroe. These kind of numbers, truly remarkable. And the competition, the company that he's seeming to do it against in LSU, who was certainly looking for a big matchup in this SEC showdown, divisional dance, whatever you want to call it. He's been fantastic, and he is going to get them across the wire. This game just about to go official. And we've seen some big performances, across the Week 11 slate here in terms of looking at the Heisman contenders. The Colorado, the Buffaloes, Travis Hunter, the two-way start. He's been fantastic. Coach Prime's always going to put him in position every single week until we hit the playoffs to have that Heisman moment. He's really going to look after his boys and his players. And, for Oregon, I know we're going to jump into a full recap of that game not too far away, but Dylan Gabriel, he is not putting a foot wrong. And the odds makers, they're telling us right now, they're undecided, Kasey. We're 4 weeks out, the final month of the regular season. They don't know who's going to win this thing, and every matchup is critical, every chance to get those wow points, and right now that's what we're seeing from Milroe.
Yeah, it's been a really tight competition. Once you think you kind of have a favorite in the mix here, there's a big game that takes off and just really illuminates one of these candidates. Do you have a favorite, Dubs? I don't think I've ever asked if you had a personal favorite outside of the odds.
Yeah, I have. Dylan Gabriel's been my guy all season long. He's always, I guess, remained in the top 3, top 4 betting choices. And I just think his play has been fantastic. What Oregon continue to do week in, week out. It was last year we're thinking, well, how good is Bo Nix? Well, I think Dylan Gabriel's probably taken it to that next level. If he puts them in line for the championship game, if they can go on to win that, there's really not much more that you want to see from this season. And for the voters, they'll be taking a look saying, has Ashton Jeanty really gone up against tough enough schools? Has Travis Hunter had the cupcakes of his schedule there for the Buffs? But when you look at Dylan Gabriel and who he's gone up against, there's no question marks. He is one of the best quarterbacks for one of the best programs in college football right now.
Yeah, the level of compete is definitely going to come into play. That's what I think you, me, and Rich have talked about when it comes to Cameron Ward in Miami. The ACC is just not the strongest amongst them all out there. I hope that love for Dylan Gabriel is almost as equal as your fight for Zach Wilson, which we chatted about earlier in the season here on College Football Today, just to make that comparison for viewers and football fans that want to know how much we trust what may or may not go down in the Heisman conversation. I know that there's a guy that moved up to the top rankings of my favorites board throughout this season, and it's Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart and the Rebels pull off a W today over the Georgia Bulldogs, 28-10. And while it may have not been a 300-yard plus performance by Jackson Dart, even though he's had a number of them thus far this season, 199, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Okay, a little shaky there, but 50 yards on the ground. That came in hot for his team. And then able to connect with Caden Lee for 81 receiving yards through 4 receptions. I mean, he still got the job done, and he did it against a Bulldogs team that's actually probably more accountable defensively than sometimes offensively, and that's just because of some of the inconsistency with Carson Beck. So what do we make of this matchup and kind of the few losses that Georgia's been delivered this season?
Yeah, I'm still trying to pick my jaw up from this one. This was probably the biggest surprise of Week 11 here. The Rebels are absolutely back. They're playing some really good football, and it was a tale of, I guess, polar opposite Saturday afternoons for your two young quarterbacks. Jackson Dart, he was very strong. I know he had that 1 interception, but he led the Rebels throughout the entirety of this game. And Carson Beck, not good enough. Coming up with costly turnovers, really couldn't get that spark when they needed it the most to keep Georgia in this ball game. And I read an interesting stat, Kasey. I believe it's the first time in 1,600 days that the Bulldogs have lost to a team outside of Bama in the regular season. So we're just not used to seeing upsets like this for the Bulldogs. Now sitting at 7-2, 5-2 in conference play. not good enough. But this is a massive win, and it's a sign of the times that the Rebels are absolutely back, and they are rolling right now.
What do you think of their national championship number at plus 750? I mean, this was the number one team coming into this season. Rankings haven't shattered too much, but some of those losses have to kind of be an implication at this point.
Absolutely. They've shown a bit of vulnerability, for Bama, who are looking pretty good out there tonight. It's not the same Bama that we have seen over the last 2-3 years. The national dynamos in the college landscape. They've had a couple of nice wins the last couple of weeks. Obviously that close one over Texas and Florida, but this is a chink in the armor, and we've now got the college football rankings, being a month out, and this is when we get to see what are the voters really going to put merit on in terms of wins, losses, style points, and this is not going to help. This is a massive letdown spot considering they've got Tennessee on deck next week. They had to get this win. Obviously, the season is still there. The playoffs are still right in their reach, but this is crunch time. This is all systems go. It was a tough spot going against the Rebels, and they came up short. So it's not a great time of year to be doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Before today's matchups, Georgia's sitting at number 2 in the top 25. We'll see what shakes out as some SEC teams collected W's and others collected losses, Georgia being one of those teams. Make sure you're following SportsGrid over at SportsGrid over on X, as well as Dubs as myself, and stick with us here on College Football Today for more college breakdowns on the other side of this quick break.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the two big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into College Football Today here on SportsGrid TV with Kasey Hudson and Dubs Anderson. It's the post-game show. Before we have Rich Simonello join us to give his perspective on the Saturday slate as we get closer to the end of the collegiate regular season and talk more about what this post-game may shape up to be. Currently going on around the nation, BYU regains the lead 10-7 over Utah. Utah with the ball right now, 1st and 10 at BYU's 25. We'll see if they can continue to make this an interesting one while BYU continues to fight for a perfect season. Then you got Washington State on top of Utah State 14-7. 14:55 left in the second quarter before they break away to halftime and see what they can come up with on the other side. We were talking about Georgia. We were talking about how their performances have kind of shaken out as of late and some of the competition that they either have not been able to escape or just narrowly get past. But what does this mean for Carson Beck? I feel bad because the last couple of weeks, I feel like whenever you talk about him, not you specifically, but whenever we talk about him, it's not that positive because we saw this outstanding performance last season, and the digression is just kind of unbearable at this point. You can see the frustration on his face on the sidelines every time a bad play comes about. So, I mean, what does this mean for Carson Beck?
It's back to the drawing board. It's just been a case of far too many turnovers that we have seen for this year. 17 passing touchdowns, that's okay, but 11 interceptions. It really has been a bit of a regression, a bit of a slump from what we saw at this time last year. So for Carson Beck, things don't get any easier, and going against a big program like we saw out here this afternoon, it really highlights a couple of deficiencies in his game and a couple of weaknesses there. So it really has been testing on the whole team, and it just hasn't been enough to keep Georgia in the ball game, and it was going to let them down eventually again. And today we got that in bright lights, 28-10. The Bulldogs go down to Ole Miss and the Rebels there. So for Carson Beck, I don't know. I mean, he's going to be a guy. We'll get Rich's thoughts, but for me, it's just been a really bad and lackluster season for Georgia and the Bulldogs. They need efficient and strong quarterback play, and they're certainly not getting that from the star senior right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't agree more. But the opposite of lackluster, especially today, you could say is Will Howard in Ohio State. And as the kids say, he is showing a lot of riz right now after kind of calling out Penn State being his dream team growing up. And they basically said wasn't good enough. And he had a chip on his shoulder heading into the matchup, making sure that his team secured a W last week. They bring that energy into the matchup versus Purdue today, securing a shutout versus Purdue. 45-0 is what the Ohio State Buckeyes ran away with today. Will Howard with 260 through the air, 3 touchdowns, clean slate when it came to interceptions. Henderson on the ground, 85 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown. And then going pace for pace with Will Howard through the air, it's Jeremiah Smith, 87 receiving yards, 6 receptions, 1 touchdown. Just a few short weeks ago, Dubs, you and I were sitting here talking about a performance by Ohio State saying, hey, they're good, but it just wasn't good enough. It wasn't really that the sexiest performance that you would expect out of Ohio State. So what do we make of 45-0 after coming off of a big victory last weekend?
This was impressive, and for the Boilermakers, far from being one of the stronger teams in college football right now, just having the 1 win for the program this season. But for Ohio State, the odds makers projected them as 37.5-point favorites. So you've got to come out and get the job done. You've got to put up the points. You've got to get that offense moving in the right direction. You can't show any kind of vulnerability to let a team like the Boilermakers into the arm wrestle. They didn't. 45-0. This was emphatic. They controlled the game. They controlled the tempo. Jeremiah Smith, 9th touchdown for the season. He's really putting a pretty special year together here. So for Ohio State and the Buckeyes, they keep moving this freight train in the right direction and taking a look at who they do have on tap: Northwestern, Indiana, and Michigan. So a pretty tough closeout going through the final month of football here. But in terms of where the big challenges are coming from in the Big Ten, they certainly look to be one of the heavyweights, and that was a heavyweight kind of knockout that we saw today.
Yeah, definitely a knockout. We'll see how they polish off the rest of the season after this 45-0 victory over Purdue. And then, just kind of adding to the confidence of Will Howard and the chip on his shoulder currently, what gives you more confidence than being the guy who opens up the scoring? A 1-yard touchdown for Will Howard to get things going for Ohio State there. You talked about fast tempo, coming out and making a statement quick and easy, and that's exactly what they did. Kind of adding to the top 25 conversation, Ohio State heading into this matchup sitting at number 3 when it comes to the APP roles. So coming up on the other side of the break, we'll have Rich Simonello to continue breaking down this Saturday's slate, painting the playoff picture, talking Heisman, national championship, and so much more. So don't go anywhere. Stick with us here on College Football Today. It's the post-game show here on SportsGrid TV.
both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the two big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Back at it with college football today here on SportsGrid TV. It's the post-game show with Kasey Hudson, Dubs Anderson, and Rich Simonello as promised. So we got to get through this Saturday slate, but a quick update on what's going on around the nation. Currently, we've got Utah State versus Washington State. Washington State holding their 14-7 lead. 14-18 in the second quarter, but the tango continues between BYU and Utah as now Utah has regained their lead 14-10, 5:31 left in the second quarter, and again, they're going to try to push BYU out of this perfect season they are having, and the three of us are here to keep you posted on all of it. But, Rich, before we talk about the current scores going on, Dubs and I were just running through the Saturday slate, talking about some of the upsets, talking about some of the impressive plays. We're going to have to circle back to a number of things with you, but I was excited to ask you about the Georgia versus Ole Miss game for a number of reasons. I think you recall how high I am on Jackson Dart. Not a 300-yard performance, but still 199 to help his team secure a victory over the Georgia Bulldogs. Big SEC matchup, but more importantly, what is Lane Kiffin doing to this program, and how does this win speak for what the Rebels can produce closing out the season?
There's no under or overstating just how big this was. I mean, this was the fork in the road for Ole Miss. This is what this program has been preparing for. Lane Kiffin has been so good in the transfer portal. The university has put out a lot of money for NIL in order to attract a higher caliber of players. That all showed up today, Kasey. This was huge. And if you look at what happened last week against Arkansas, we talked about it last Saturday night, putting up 63 on Arkansas, finally unlocking that offense, which had struggled. But this is really a defensive team. They have so much next-level talent. Walter Nolan up front, Chris Paul on the second level, Princely Umanmielen off the edge. This is a very good elite defense. And after the Georgia win, guys, I think Ole Miss can beat anybody in the country. I think they can beat Oregon. I think they can beat Ohio State. Can they go through the gauntlet in the playoffs? We'll see. But they're just a couple of wins away from either having their first ever appearance in an SEC title game or getting a shot in the college football playoff. I was very impressed that despite the fact that the offense wasn't great, they still were able to manhandle Georgia at the point of attack.
Rich, for you, what was the standout for the stagnant offense there for Georgia and the Bulldogs? You look at Carson Beck, the numbers say statistically he was okay, but really struggled to get it downfield. Only 2 plays going north of 20 receiving yards. So is he to blame for the offensive struggles there that we saw today?
Yeah, Dubs, certainly in part. I mean, back-to-back games prior to this week in which he had 3 picks, that was just the complete opposite of what we saw from Carson Beck a year ago. He looked like he was a Heisman frontrunner before the season began. He looked like he was a sure thing to be a first-round draft pick. Now those dynamics have changed. Some poor decision-making, and I don't want to take the blame off of him. He has struggled for sure, but tons of drop passes from those receivers. They don't have the playmakers like they did a year ago. Brock Bowers at tight end, Ladd McConkey at wide receiver, so reliable, such good hands out of those 2 receivers. They don't have those kinds of playmakers this year. And even the offensive line, which looked like it would be top 5 or 6 in the country before the season began, they're not protecting Carson Beck the way they did in the past. So it really looks like a total breakdown offensively, and it's shocking when you go back to that Texas game, Dubs. That was in Austin, and that's a very good top 5 Texas team, and Georgia had their way with the Longhorns. We haven't seen that team since then, and now with 2 losses, I think if they're 10-2, they probably get into the playoffs, but man, their margin for error was completely evaporated at Ole Miss today.
Yeah, they're getting in a position to be looking through a window. That window reference did come in a number of times today, though, when we were talking about Alabama versus LSU. Probably some expectation for LSU to put up a bigger fight here, but falling short to Alabama 42-13, able to grab a few extra points as the fourth quarter wound down. But we saw that Alabama's just kind of sitting right inside the window still for a playoff opportunity. LSU kind of looking in. But what did this performance by Alabama do for their playoff stock and opportunity? We knew it was kind of do or die for both of these teams. Milroe with another huge performance to help Alabama secure a win.
Yeah, I mean, this was a playoff elimination game. There's no question. I don't think a 3-loss team gets into the playoffs. I mean, it's possible a team could sneak in with an at-large bid. I don't think it happens this season. For LSU to lose as badly as they did at home, they don't lose night games at home, especially under Brian Kelly. And for them to be mauled the way they were against Alabama was a shocker. I certainly thought this was going to be a lot more competitive game. Garrett Nussmeier, his performance over the past couple of weeks really gives you the impression, guys, that he would be wise to come back to Baton Rouge for another season rather than test NFL waters. He would be drafted for sure, but I think he could improve his NFL draft stock by returning to school in 2025. But what Alabama did, not just offensively, you're right, Kasey, Jalen Milroe, fantastic, may have catapulted himself back into the Heisman discussion. But the defense, which had struggled a lot this year, especially at the point of attack, they abused an LSU offensive line that has 2 future NFL tackles in Emory Jones and Will Campbell. They had their way with the LSU offensive line. So Alabama suddenly, those 2 SEC teams, Alabama and Ole Miss, really helped their cause when it comes to the playoffs. Alabama can take this game. This is such a big confidence boost. And just quickly, before we move on to another game, the coaching mismatch here was Kalen DeBoer with 2 weeks to prepare over Brian Kelly. I mean, the game plan from Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan, his offensive coordinator, they just ran circles around that LSU staff. So, I mean, we might be seeing another Brian Kelly meltdown in the postgame press conference tonight.
Jalen Milroe certainly did his fair share of running there to get the Crimson Tide over the line. Across to the Big Ten we go, Reg. Indiana Hoosiers looking fantastic. Are they the best team in the top 10? Are they one of the teams to catch? Because I keep trying to make holes in this schedule and what they have achieved, but they're at 10-0. It's the first 10-win season that the program has seen, and they'll special again today to fend off a pretty game Wolverines.
Yeah, and listen, nobody should dismiss the fact that Michigan isn't the Michigan we saw a year ago. I understand that. It's not the same team we've seen over the past few years under Jim Harbaugh. This is a very different team, but this is still Michigan. And there are a lot of ghosts in Bloomington when it comes to Michigan. Indiana just doesn't beat Michigan. So this is still a really big deal for the Hoosiers. The offense didn't have it today. Curtis Rourke and the running game, they were average. But the one thing that I like, Dubs, is this program has momentum. And with each win that they pick up, the confidence continues to build. You could just tell this team is learning how to win close games. They have the muscle memory now. They're making plays defensively. I have a lot of trust in Curt Cignetti's offense. So despite scoring just 20 today, I think they can ramp that up. 2 weeks to prepare for Ohio State. I mean, win that game, and it's anything goes for the Hoosiers at that point. Even if they lose it, I think they're in a very good spot when it comes to the playoffs. They'll wrap up the season against Purdue. At worst, Indiana's 11-1 and going to the playoffs, which is hard to fathom at this stage of the season.
Yeah, and heading into this matchup, Indiana sitting at number 8 in the top 25. Do you see that hopping or making them a bigger move moving over the next course of the couple weeks here?
I mean, it might happen by tomorrow, Kasey, just because of the losses in the top 10. You had 2 teams go down. Georgia, we already talked about. Miami losing to Georgia Tech. So, yeah, I think Indiana can continue to creep up, possibly move up to number 6 by the end of the weekend. And again, Curt Cignetti, strong candidate for National Coach of the Year at this point. And I've said it before, Indiana is no longer a Cinderella team. This is a team that can win playoff games.
I agree. It'll be exciting to see what shakes up here. We'll talk more top 25 as well as the scores around the nation here on college football today. It's the postgame show with Kasey, Dubs, and Rich. Don't go anywhere. Stick with us here on SportsGrid TV. We'll catch you on the other side of this quick break.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
You are watching College Football Today here on SportsGrid TV with Kasey Hudson, Dubs Anderson, and Rich Sermonello running through the Saturday slate. And conversation just continues to get interesting. We talk about Indiana, and I don't want to call it a narrow escape. It's a little dramatic, but what the Wolverines defense helped maintain there, they kept the margin nice and close just by 5 points. Now, while we were discussing that before heading into the break, we were discussing also basically the rest of the scheduling coming up for Indiana and how they're going to be able to come out on top potentially. But one of the guys that's going to help with that is going to be Curtis Rook. You and I talked about him last week a bit, Rich, but these numbers are changing around when it comes to the Heisman candidate conversation. And I'm setting this up perfectly so that you and Dubs can continue a conversation that y'all were having during the break. But looking at these numbers right now, Travis Hunter for Colorado plus 135, Dylan Gabriel plus 280. Then you've got Boise State's running back, Genty, plus 310. Cameron Ward bumps down to plus 800. And then you got Indiana's quarterback, Curtis Rook, at 14-1 odds. What stands out the most in how these numbers have changed around now that we're 3 weeks out from closing the regular season?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, big hit for Cam Ward, which is unfortunate. I think he's had a great season. He has carried that Miami program. Looked like he might have a shot again today against Georgia Tech for a late rally, but sacked, fumbled. Georgia Tech pulls off the upset, so Cam Ward's odds get a little bit longer. I understand that. To me, I all season long, the most sensible pick has been Travis Hunter. But if you want to kind of get an idea as to what voters think, I think the most likely pick right now would be Dylan Gabriel. Dylan Gabriel breaks the all-time NCAA total touchdown record today with his 179th TD responsible for. They're probably most likely going to get another shot at Ohio State. If you could beat the Buckeyes twice, second time obviously would be in the Big Ten title game. If you rack up numbers on the number one team and you beat Ohio State twice, I think Heisman voters would have a hard time not picking Dylan Gabriel. The only knock on Travis Hunter, I wouldn't call it a knock, but maybe the one thing to consider is Shedeur Sanders kind of belongs in this conversation as well. We were also talking in the break about the Colorado Buffaloes and the fact that they're 7-2, won 6 of the last 7 games. Now in second place in the Big 12, Iowa State lost for the second time, upset by Kansas today. So Colorado controls its own destiny in the Big 12 title chase, a shot to possibly play BYU. Shedeur might steal some votes from his teammate. You know, he's been so good under center. He's put up great numbers. He's the leader of that offense. He still takes a few too many hits. I know Dion would prefer to him to be better protected. I love this kid as the leader of that offense. So does Shedeur steal some votes from Travis? It's something to consider as we get closer to the Heisman vote.
With Coach Prime calling the shots, Rich, taking a look at the big Heisman contenders, you've got to imagine if there's a head coach that's going to set up his players to have their Heisman moment going through the rest of the regular season, it's got to be Coach Prime, and suddenly they're right in the mix here. I mean, they could be pushing for a playoff spot, no?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's wild. I really have been impressed with the way he's been able to build, not just with the 2 stars. There was a time when it looked like it was Shedeur and Travis Hunter, and then struggles on the offensive line last year, certainly struggles on defense. But what makes this team a Big 12 contender right now is they're getting closer, Dubs, to being a complete football team, meaning they're making plays on defense. Today against Texas Tech, which on the road in Lubbock, always a tough place to play. This was going to be the toughest regular season game left for the Buffaloes. That defense had a bunch of sacks, a bunch of takeaways, a bunch of money plays. So they're complementing what Colorado can do offensively. And at this stage of the season, they're healthy. Travis Hunter's back to 100%. They're gaining confidence. They're stringing together wins. So, you know, the regular season, they have 3 games in which they'll be favored left. Watch out 2 weeks from now against Kansas. Kansas is a team that has much better talent than their 3-6 record indicates. They have a terrific head coach in Lance Leipold. They're still playing for possible bowl eligibility. Having said that, Colorado controls its own destiny to get to the Big 12 title game. We're 4 Buffalo wins away from seeing Dion in the playoffs, which would be just a wild scene for that time of year.
Oh, it's definitely everything that they wanted to project into the headlines from last season to this season, the expectation heading into this season, some of the controversy in the beginning in terms of how things were going to shake out. Some score updates right now. We've got Utah versus BYU. Utah extending their lead 20-10 over BYU, 1:46 left in the second quarter. And then as for Washington State versus Utah State, Washington State stacks point-wise 21-7. Now, we got a little bit under 2 minutes here, but we kind of touched on Kansas being a surprising team. They come up with a victory 45-36 over Iowa State. What's probably the biggest takeaway from this win for Kansas?
Yeah, just resiliency, Kasey. Like I love when teams, I like to really watch what teams are doing at this stage of the season when there's not a ton to play for. 2-6, this was a team that was ranked in the preseason, brought a lot of veterans back. They couldn't win one-score games. They're 0-5 this season in one-score games. The fact that they're still playing hard, putting points up, Jalen Daniels, Devin Neal out of the backfield, both had great games against a really good Iowa State defense. And for Iowa State, yeah, it feels like a hangover effect from last week's loss against Texas Tech. You know, they lost with just 20 seconds left on a Taj Brooks run into the end zone. So, yeah, Iowa State back-to-back losses and now potentially fading out of the Big 12 race.
Yeah, that was an interesting game between Texas Tech last week, and I kind of alluded to it a number of times today because Texas Tech went up against Colorado, and they just had this moment where it seemed like the game was theirs in full command. They had these strong first quarters, and then they're just unable to succeed through 4 quarters of play. But I don't know if that was more of a lack of Texas play or of just the dominance of Colorado coming in just as strong. We got a couple more games to get to on the other side of this break coming up here. Plus, we got to check out Dubs' bet card. I haven't done one in a while, but it doesn't. Yes, absolutely. The accountability moment that I don't have to be a part of. Maybe we can get reactions from Rich. We're going to talk top 25, maybe guesstimate some national championship talk. Doesn't matter. Don't go anywhere. Stick with us here on Sports Grid.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
back into college football today here on SportsGrid TV, the post-game show with Kasey, Dubs, and Rich. Look, before we put Dubs in the hot seat, because I am a good friend, let's get some final takes on the slate today. Rich, I'll start with you. What was probably the top game of the day for you, or the top game that had the largest takeaway that viewers and football fans should be keeping in mind as we get ready to close out the regular season?
Well, by far for me, it's Ole Miss, because I've been watching this team for the past couple of weeks, waiting for that big breakout moment, something that validates my belief that they have the talent and the coaching staff to win a national championship. I think they're that good. It's a wide open season. We have no clear-cut national champion favorite. Maybe it's Oregon, maybe Ohio State, but the reality is Ole Miss has as much talent as anyone else. They have a veteran quarterback in Jackson Dart. They have a veteran coach in Lane Kiffin, and I just love this defense. I mean, they are quick to the ball. They close fast to the quarterback. They're outstanding at the line of scrimmage. So for me, Ole Miss beating Georgia validates this program as a legit playoff contender. And then just B, 1A, 1B, 1B is Alabama. I mean, Alabama has been down at times this year, losses to Vandy and Tennessee, but they throttled LSU. They knock LSU out of the playoff chase and vault them back into the discussion. So SEC, a little bit of separation with Ole Miss and Alabama making their mark today.
We've got some games almost heading into halftime. BYU now with the ball, 2nd and 10 on BYU's 41. Utah holding their lead 21-10. Clock winding down, under 50 seconds to go. And then Washington State with the ball, 4th and 3rd on Washington's 32. 21-7 on top of Utah State. 5 minutes to go, so still plenty of game there. But those are some halftimes that are going to be coming up here on SportsGrid. All right, Dubs, your biggest takeaway of the day, favorite game. What did you have before we put you in the hot seat?
Yeah, so I thought the Rebels were fantastic, but for me it was more about the individual brilliance. I thought that version of Quinn Ewers and the Longhorns, very impressive. That was one of the best displays we've seen all season long from them, and they need to bounce back. The Heisman market is even closer. We still cannot decipher the top 3 on the betting board. Travis Hunter, he was fantastic there for Coach Prime in Colorado. Dylan Gabriel, he's still going to be my top choice for Oregon, and that efficiency that we're seeing at that quarterback position. And Ashton Jeanty, as long as Boise State continue to roll and he's continuing to put up PlayStation numbers, he's going to keep himself right there in the conversation. So I thought it was a big week. The big contenders absolutely stood up and got it done. A bit like my betting card, Kasey.
I was going to come right back to the betting card. I'm like, all right, PlayStation numbers. Did any of those play into the wins or the losses on the card? Let's see if we get the card up. And Dubs, explain yourself. I mean, take a victory lap where you can, and then, just handle the rest. I've had to do it. I think I've had one win once versus you, so trust me, I've had to do it.
No, we're doing okay. Finished 3 for 5. Whenever we're going 3 for 5, staying on the right side of it. We had the Texas team total, 34.5 against Florida. We cashed that one. Michigan, 14.5 on the spread there. We cashed that. Georgia on the money line. This was probably the biggest disappointment of the afternoon, going down to Ole Miss. And then Penn State, very impressive, leading 28-0 at halftime. We needed cover by 12.5. We absolutely got that. And I guess lucky last here, Jalen Milroe had one of his best games at quarterback, but he was using the wheels, not that right arm, not the passing there. So we don't hit that last one. 3 for 5, survive, advance. Thanks for coming, Week 11 college football slate. Not as bad as you thought it was going to be, Kasey. I know you're winding up to get those punches in. Rich, you could see it as well.
No.
I thought it was going to be worse, to be honest.
Exactly.
I was expecting a bloodbath. That was not bad, right?
Right.
Survive, survive and advance.
And then, also what makes a betting card, really good or really bad is depending on your pick. So those weren't hideous picks. So even if you lost all of those, I feel like you still pick some, really gold things to try to cash out on. See, I'm not that terrible of a friend. I'm not rooting against you. I'm just slightly competitive. That's the only difference here. Now I feel motivated to come back with a betting card next week. But also, alluding to next week, make sure you join us next week because college football, the regular season is starting to roll to an end, but that's just going to make for an even more exciting postseason. We got to see how the numbers shake out in the top 25, the Heisman conversation, and who might be going to the national championship. So much to get to before we get to November 30th. Make sure you're following SportsGrid over at SportsGrid. Make sure you're following all of us over on X to continue the conversation there. And look, guys, that's a wrap for us tonight, but we will be back next week to continue the college football conversation. I hope everybody had a wonderful Saturday night.